Welcome everyone to MailFuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about The Boys Season 5 Episode 4. It's called Through the Heavens Fall. So spoilers for the episode as always. And I'm pleased to say I think this is the best episode of the season so far. It's not perfect. I think Annie's plot is very by the numbers and predictable for what it's doing, right? The whole visiting her father, getting some answers, meeting his new family, all that. Pretty by the numbers, typical stuff. There's no really any surprises, like to the point where you could guess immediately that our little brother was going to call the police or the authorities or someone. If anything, it was the only surprising part is that it was only one guy that showed up, as opposed to, you know, because it's basically that scene from X-Men 2 where they go to like Iceman's house and his sibling calls the police and they all show up en masse. It's the exact same thing, but so that plot's kind of just fine, right? It's whatever. I have very little to say about it. However, the main plot, well, I was a little bit worried at first because it was very much this go and find the V1 at this old research facility, which is very similar to going to find in the last episode, and it's just a simple MacGuffin search. Once they got there, there was actually a story. Which I know sounds crazy, but they actually had a story to tell, which is that they all start acting like angry and out of character, and you kind of realize at a certain point, oh, something's affecting them. And Frenchie starts to notice that this is happening and deduces that he's immune because he's been so addicted to so many things for so many years that he's built up a tolerance for whatever this is. And eventually Homelander and Soldier Boy also show up looking for it. Soldier Boy goes with them, because Sage talks to him, and actually this is an interesting sequence actually where they talk, because even in the scene it felt like Sage wants Soldier Boy to stop Homelander. It doesn't sound like she actually wants Homelander to be like around forever, which would feed into the idea that she knows that eventually this is not going to work and she's actually just putting Homelander into a corner where he's going to lose. That would actually be the most expected thing ever, given she's supposed to see stuff coming. But it really felt like she was saying all the right things to convince Soldier Boy to go and get to the V1 first, because she's like, hey, if he finds that, he'll be immortal, he'll be around forever, and we all want that, right? And it's like, oh, I feel like you're actually trying to give him the idea to go find the V1 and like destroy it or get rid of it or whatever, so that can't happen. That's at least what I was feeling in the moment. And then of course, you know, he does lock Homelander in the super chamber, which has uranium in it, which keeps Homelander locked up for quite a while, long enough for a little conversation with Butcher in the middle when Butcher finds him, which I actually really like that scene, particularly the part towards the end of it where Butcher is describing Homelander as like, oh, you think you're God now, I know you better than you are, and all you really are is a pathetic, sad little boy. And then specifically points out, you beat up your own son, that's about as pathetic as it gets. And I thought that was actually a really nice line because of the history of his father, with Butcher's father, and what happened to his brother. I think that actually landed with some weight to it, and it's maybe the most weighty line that anyone's had this season, to be honest. So I actually thought that was a really good touch, and part of why he hates Homelander so much is because he recognizes a lot of the faults that his own father had. I see some merit there, and I think that's worth exploring a little bit. But you know, I think there was a simple plot this episode of them all acting out of character, and the first sort of sign of it is because arguably Butcher ignoring what Kimiko says when they're walking to the place, you could say is maybe the first real sign. But Butcher's been a dick to everyone, especially her anyway, that I didn't really notice anything wrong with that. It's when Huey calls Starlight a bitch. That's the moment where you're like, wait a minute. And even they react to it. So obviously they're getting closer, but they're not quite, it hasn't quite kicked in yet fully, but it's starting to seed in. And he says that, and he even says, oh, I'm sorry, that sounded so harsh. And the way Kimiko looks at him is quite funny. But once they get in the building, it starts getting more heated, and they say things that are really, really mean to each other. And part of the reason why this works as a story trope, this is not an original idea. Obviously, the fact that a soup is causing it, that's like spread out like tree branches all over the place, very Last of Us looking, which actually gets referenced at one point, is because this idea of there being some kind of, you know, in other shows it may be a magic spell, it might be a drug, it may be something, anything else. but this idea that something supernatural or science fiction makes people act out their kind of like either inner desires or their most baseline feelings, where everything they're saying has some level of truth to it. They're not saying anything that is just completely made up. No one's saying, oh, Huey, you are like, I don't know, like, you are a really fat man or something. You know, that's something that's obvious, you know, untrue. It's all stuff that does come from truth. It's stuff where saying Butcher puts them through a lot of shit and that, you know, MM will be glad when he's dead. There's a ring of truth to that, right? Because he has always put them through shit and he's always had a problem with how Butcher treats them. You know, Chemical calling Frenchie an addict and saying that he's a like a man whore or something like that. Like, these are all things that are based in some truth. So it's like, you get that bit at the end where it's like, okay, we're all sorry we said what we said, but it came from somewhere. It didn't just manifest out of nowhere. It took like the seeds of things that are kind of in there and then blew them up. So it felt like they actually got to act out their frustrations that they've all been kind of like just kind of skirting around up until this point in the season. So that also made it feel like something was actually happening after a few episodes, where it felt like we were actually advancing some of the character storylines to the point where, oh, maybe they're in a better place. Also, MM's got his mojo back. He cleans up at the start of the episode, shaves a little bit, and he's acting like MM again, which, you know, obviously he helped that teen superhero last time. Maybe that's kind of the catalyst for it. It's fine. I'm just kind of glad that he's back to normal, I guess. I wasn't necessarily enjoying punished MM. It wasn't as fun as as like confident MM. But yeah, I mean, the actual playing out of this, where it breaks down to the point where they're actually hunting each other, I think debatable there's a little bit of like plot armor here, where in reality, like, the ones that aren't supers, like MM and Huey, should probably be dead, right? They should probably be dead because Chemical should have killed them. And they did play with that a little bit, where Chemical almost became a horror movie villain hunting Huey, who's like hiding in the furnace, and it's only because Soldier Boy, who's also feeling the effects, is talked into killing this plant guy who's like a V1 soup in the basement. He kind of like angers him up, so he'll do his like ultra blast at him, and that ends everything, and everyone immediately goes back to normal. But it's right in the nick of time before Chemical's getting to Huey to kill him and whatever else is happening. But, you know, you could argue there's a bit of plot armor. You know, they should have just been dead much quicker. But I do appreciate that it almost became like Chemical's like the biggest, scariest villain ever now, because she can't be killed. She just keeps getting back up. And they had a couple of funny moments, and you know, there's the usual kind of stuff sort of mixed in between all that. And I think it actually felt like it had a plot for an episode. This is not the ongoing plot. It was clearly a plot that was going to be wrapped up by the end, but that felt like an old school TV episode to me. It felt like, oh no, we've got an idea for this one. This is one of those types of episode where they're all acting out a character, but it is going to shed light on how they're all actually feeling. The one negative to that maybe is that it was all very obvious. It was obvious how they were all feeling anyway, and that may usually be the case in TV if the characters are well defined, but usually it reveals things to themselves, like to each other, where they kind of admit things that they didn't know they were feeling, or they admit something to the other person about how they're feeling about them, and that's where you get the kind of I'm not really sure I believe that they didn't really expect it to hear this from each other, and at least in some form or another, especially particular pairs of them where like, really, is Butcher surprised Huey's lost a lot of faith in him? Is he surprised that MM said what he did about him? I don't know. It feels like not that much. And it does lead to maybe my biggest complaint about the episode, actually, is the conversation that Frenchie and Chemical have after everything when they go home. Which, by the way, they just kind of like leave, and even though Soldier Boy was in the room with most of them, apparently he just feels kind of sad and wants to die, so he just kind of lets them go. But Frenchie and Chemical have kind of the typical, the writers came up with a reason to kind of make them break up, even though it doesn't feel like there's any reason for them to, where she basically just says, oh, I can speak again because I sorted through all of my chaos. But the problem, Frenchie, is that you love chaos, and I have to like cut that out of my life. But he just said that he's sober, he's finally quit using, he's clean. So I don't know what chaos she's talking about exactly. It just feels like this weird thing she's making like a solid. She's manifesting this idea that he looks for chaos and goes after chaos. And I'm not really sure that's felt like a true thing in some time. And if anything, I would have attached that to his drug problems and the character from his past showing up. I don't know if he's necessarily been attracted to chaos recently, but they kind of end this scene on a where does that leave us? Are we breaking up? Should we feel sad about Kimiko and Frenchie now? And the weird thing is that I was starting to get to the point where I was bored of them being so happy because it felt like they were just signposting that they're definitely going to die. And now they're throwing this wrench in to give them a little bit of conflict. And it just feels a little bit like out of nowhere and forced for the sake of giving them conflict. And obviously, you need conflict in TV and storytelling. You absolutely do. But we have an ensemble. We don't necessarily need to have it between every pair of characters, right? We have some bigger conflicts that we have been doing since the start of the show that still need to be resolved. And this had finally reached a point where maybe there was something coming from this. Now, to be fair, like, I think Frenchie, in a lot of ways, has been the weakest character on the show for the last couple of seasons. Even season 3 to an extent, certainly season 4, but even in season 3, when I was liking a lot of other things in season 3, right, I think season 2 and 3 are really good. I think they're very underrated, because I hear a lot of people say that season 1 was great, and then it's been bad since. I disagree with that. I do think 2 and 3 were good seasons, and I liked them more than season 1 even, right? I think they had a lot to offer. I think season 4 is where it got a little bit rocky, and season 5's been kind of rocky as well so far. And my theory right now is they stretched one season plot over 2 seasons, and it's making them both suffer as a result. But the character that I was kind of done with, I think even in season 3, was Frenchie. All of his stuff with the characters from his past showing up felt just kind of so disconnected to everything else. I wasn't really that enthusiastic about it. So I'm actually kind of happy that he's just kind of clean and he's just kind of like being the sensible one almost when everyone else is going crazy. I think that was actually a good role for him this episode. And then the end of the episode has to try and give him and Kimiko conflict. And I think part of the problem is that all of Frenchie's plots since about season 3 onwards have felt like we have to give him conflict somehow. And it's never that satisfying or interesting or really ties into the rest of the show all that well. So that's where I'm at with that. So I hate that I've sort of turned that into a negative by the end, but I did actually really dislike that scene and that conversation. Because we've all seen those TV episodes. It's a very like network TV thing. The CW did it tons of times on all their shows where characters are in a happy relationship and they want them to break up either because they've got a new love interest planned or they've got some other plot they want to do, or they just don't like writing the main character in a relationship. Not that Frenchie's the main character in this case, but I just mean generally that's what's happening in these other shows. So they just sort of have a character say, you really are into this thing and I can't be with that for now, so we're going to break up. And it always feels so hollow, and it's just a very, very poor, sloppily written reason to have this. Now, maybe they've got some great plot idea that needs these two to be kind of separated, or at least on kind of a shaky ground, or not happy, for later things to work. Maybe that's the case. But even if that stuff is gold, this is still a weak way of getting them there. And if that stuff isn't gold, then this is just going to feel like a pointless waste of time. So this was, I think this scene's going to be weak in hindsight, regardless of how it ends up. The end goal might still be good, but this wasn't. So there's that. But I liked all the main stuff in the lab of them sneaking around, trying to kill each other, them bursting out with all their ideas, and Huey even shoots MM in the shoulder at one point. So, fun. Other things throughout. Obviously, you've got Homelander and Soldier Boy also snapping at each other, which leads to him getting locked in the cell. Homelander looks like he's ready to fire his eyes at Soldier Boy, but Soldier Boy's basically he's asking for it at the end. He's like, just go ahead and do it. He's kind of lost and doesn't want to be around anymore. So it doesn't seem like Homelander does it. It seems like he wants to keep him around. So maybe he likes him looking weak. Maybe it's like that's like the first time he's liked him all episode. They do bond a little bit over the fact that they both had sex with Stormfront. Well, I say bond. They brag and make jokes about it, and Homelander does. Soldier Boy kind of takes it a bit more seriously, I guess. Other than that, though, Homelander's whole thing where he tells Firecracker that he wants to be God now, and he wants everyone to follow him as God, and she's kind of conflicted because she does seemingly actually believe in Jesus and God and all that stuff. and feels conflicted, but is on board because he's Homelander, and she can't, admit that she's been wrong about the leader she's been following. Something that, I wish lots of people could realize they're wrong about leaders they follow, but hey, they get stuck in the mud and they keep going anyway. So we get her doing focus groups. We also get Ashley and her husband, the preacher man. They have obviously weird kinky sex where she's the dom because, that's been long established. That's her thing. He knows about the face in the back of her head. He talks about it and complains that it rats on him when he's hiding the financial status of his church tour. So there's some jokes to be had there, and ridiculous boys dialogue about them having sex, and all the way they phrase things. But they end up all together to try and figure out, how do we sell Homelander as the new god? And they basically admit that, hey, only maybe 20% of the entire country would even accept this, and we need it to be at least in the 70s to make it a lasting thing. And they're trying to how do we repackage it? How do we say this or that? And it's got some of the typical boys jokes that come out here about some of the ideas. Particularly, I think Jackie Tome guest stars as she's the one kind of moderating this. What was her name? Courtney Fortney. That's her name. Courtney Fortney. All right. Okay. Whatever. But she's here moderating this and calls, she says Firecrotch, which Firecracker assumes is her, and she gets mad, and then she's like, no, not you, and she points at Ashley, which is fair, honestly, again, given her whale sexcapades that we have seen. But yeah, they end up deciding on calling it the Democratic Church of America, is I think what they land on, and their god will be Homelander. And the episode ends with them making their big presentation. And Preacher Man's got his superpower, which is when he says certain words, waves go out. I assume he's influencing people. I'm assuming it's aiding the whole idea of him being a preacher. And Homelander comes out. But Homelander's not hearing any of the chanting. He's just kind of in his own head at the end of the episode. And this stuff was okay too. I didn't like it as much as the stuff in the lab with everyone getting angry because of this influence of the superpower. And I like the visual of the super that was causing all this as well, the whole sort of roots of the tree kind of thing they had going on. I was kind of into that. I thought it was a cool visual. A little bit more interesting than the volcanic rock dude from last episode. But I do think this is an interesting plot as well, though. Mainly because the idea that Firecracker is even now conflicted about what Homelander's asking to do, but having to kind of hide and just do it anyway, and Ashley recognizing that she's conflicted by that was at least a little bit interesting. And it feels like we're doing something where even his most loyal follower is starting to side-eye what he's trying to do a little bit. He's crossing a line that even she doesn't like. And there's some interesting potential there. And I guess I'm also more convinced than ever that Sage is secretly plotting his downfall, and all of this is leading to exactly what she wants. And at the end, she's going to walk out and say, hey, I helped all you good guys win this. I hope you realize that. I put him in this position for you to win. The 1 in 1 billion plan that was going to defeat him, I made sure that was all in place from my side. So you're welcome. I'm expecting that kind of ending for Sage. But I'm not going to sit here and say this was the most amazing episode of the show or anything like that, and the way it kind of just quickly did the Ryan stuff at the start, where Ryan just disappears after a couple of quick words with Billy, that was whatever. It was fine. I almost forgot about it completely though, because I thought the line of Butcher to Homelander saying you beat up your own son, that's the most pathetic thing there is. I thought that was such a good line that I'll forgive anything else that happened with Ryan at the start of the episode. So yeah, I mean that's that. I guess there was a little scene or two with the Deep and Black Noir, who is just the new Black Noir. He's just been method acting the whole time. There was no one else under the mask, and he's pissed at the Deep for knocking him out last episode and taking Edgar to Homelander. And their podcast isn't going so well when he does that. That's pretty much that. And then, just to touch on the Starlight stuff again, I don't really have much to say about it. She bonds with her brother a little bit. There's some jokes about him masturbating because he's that age. And yeah, she bonds with her dad. Her dad's turns out to be this good guy who didn't like that her mother was filling her head with all this "you're the chosen one" nonsense. and he regrets abandoning her. He should have been around to try and fight that, but he didn't know how. And that's basically it. So they leave her in a good place, and Starlight kind of cries a little bit when she leaves. I guess the big scene is when the other cop shows up and tries to take her, and the dad kind of talks him down and makes it clear that she's not who the media says she is, and reminds them that they're close friends, and blah, 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 blah. And the other cop says, you know what? I'll give you an hour, I'll go away, but she better be gone. Like, as far as I'm concerned, I didn't see her, but she can't stay here, blah, blah, blah. And that's kind of it. So that's the big scene of that one. It's the only real like dramatic point, honestly. Most of the rest of it is like Starlight, wrapping up her story in a bit of a bow of like finally speaking to her father that we heard left her a long time ago, and meeting her other family, who, to be fair, the new wife seemed to be very nice to her, so that was something. It was. And it's all just a reminder that, hey, the people that you love are important and you shouldn't abandon them. Because I abandoned you, so you shouldn't abandon the people you love. And that makes her go back to Huey at the end. And yeah, so she's back. And the team's together, and I guess in the healthiest place they've been in some time, aside from Frenchie and Kimiko's romantic partnership. But that's maybe a separate thing. So we'll see how that goes. Not that I'm saying everyone likes Butcher, but at least MM kind of acknowledges that, yeah, I meant every word I said, but we're good. Like, this is how you've always been, so I'm just kind of used to it. So yeah, and they're watching like old tapes of Soldier Boy getting experimented on, so that's also maybe interesting. But that's kind of it. I think that I like this one more than the last two episodes for sure. Maybe even more than the first one. It felt like it had like an episode plot. It felt like it had a purpose on its own that wrapped up by the end. It felt like it gave me a full story, that it advanced kind of how everything's feeling about the rest of the season. And even Homelander like calls the bluff and says, oh, you don't even have the virus, right? You don't have the thing to take me out because you'd have used it by now, Butcher. Now, obviously, French is growing more, so there will be more virus potentially, but and then the debate, of course, like, do we destroy the V1 so that Homelander can't get it, or do we give it to Annie and Kimiko to protect them? Butcher's got no interest in doing that, but that's another bit of a conflict that got brewing during this episode. So we'll see how that goes. This was better. I went into this episode a little bit, I wasn't that excited after being a little bit down in the last couple. This was pretty decent, at least, if not pretty even good. So hopefully this is kind of the start of an upward trend getting into the back half of the season, because yeah, we're halfway through now, so hopefully the back half does something that we can all enjoy. And it's no accident, by the way, the mole guy in the focus group for the Homelander Jesus thing, actually, when he got defensive about having to write a series finale and why it ended up bad, and it felt like the writers are almost poking at themselves in a meta way of like, hey, if this sucks, please don't be mad at us. There's so many characters to pay off. So, we'll see. Hopefully we don't feel that way. But there you go. That is my thoughts on this week's episode of The Boys. So let me know what you thought of this one in the comments below. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. Helps out a bunch if you do. And of course, if you want to support the channel and everything I do here, with myself and with others, and then obviously MailFuzz Movies over on the Movie Podcast channel, you can do all that over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and get some bonuses for your trouble. And thanks to everyone who already does. But that is me. Thank you very much for joining. I do appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?